Hey, Fringe listeners, the Queen of Sparkle, the lovely Dr. Rosie Ward, who always brings such great insights and such a positive attitude and just fires you up. Yes, she is with us today on Fringe. We are airing one of our favorite episodes from her show, Show Up as a Leader. It's a fantastic show. It's been with us for years now and is growing like gangbusters. And if you've never listened, you're about to experience why, because you're going to be a new follower. So here are tools for future ready leaders from Dr. Rosie Ward. Give it a listen, let us know what you think, and follow the show.
Hi, everyone. I regularly describe how the future demands that we have braver leaders and courageous cultures. And I am obsessed with normalizing the messiness of being human because, quite frankly, our own humanity gets in our way of being courageous in our lives and having the impact we want to have. And there's been such a great response to the Rosie in my pocket, the small doses of nuggets and inspiration, as well as the regular episodes. And people have asked me to dig a little bit deeper into some specific tools that can help you show up as a courageous leader and that you can lean on. And so we are introducing the Courageous Leadership series, which really is just that, some periodic bonus episodes where we have conversations and we go deeper into various tools and aspects of what it means to not just show up as a leader in our life, but show up as a courageous leader in our life, where we lean into the cringe, we don't tap out when things get hard. And so I hope that these periodic bonus conversations are of value to you and that you can put some of these elements into practice and make a positive impact in your life.
This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self.
Rosie, I am excited to collaborate on another episode with you today. I really want to dig into courageous leadership a bit more and how I can show up as a more courageous leader. And in our conversation, help other listeners, all the listeners, to gain inspiration to be a more courageous leader too.
I am so up for it. Let's do it.
Okay. So, first up, there seems like there's a lot of heaviness right now. I'd just love to get a kind of check in on the current workplace landscape of leaders. Like, what is data showing you right now that leaders are struggling with most?
That's such a great question. And why I love it is because I'm obsessed with normalizing what we're experiencing. And I think so many leaders are struggling and they feel like, oh, it's just me. And so a couple of the stats that I've been using is the American Psychological Association reported at the end of last year that 87% of adults feel like there has been a constant stream of crises since 2020 without a break, and it's taking its toll. And I think that's important. Like this constant stream, when you think about what it does for our trauma response and our psyche, and then you look at Gartner HR put out a report that American adults can only absorb half the amount of change that they could in 2019. Well, it makes sense because if we're in this crisis mode, cognitively we're on overload. And when we're on cognitive overload, we can't absorb much more. And so then you look at stats that say, compared to last year, there's a 35% increase in stress and a 38% increase in burnout. And so you have this perfect storm of people are exhausted. So people who have formal leadership roles are exhausted, and then they're trying to lead and engage and energize teams that are exhausted. You're right. There is a heaviness and there's an exhaustion and a level of stress that we haven't seen for a long time. And now there's an epidemic, a mental health epidemic crisis with our kids. So anyone who has kids, it's just a multiplier. And so there's just a lot that we have to be taking into consideration as employers. And it has to go beyond the, oh yeah, let's talk about mental health at the workplace. Do you have an EAP? Do you have that? Like there's so many Band-Aid things that are going on, but it's very real right now.
Gosh, you think about the ripple effect of things that have just been happening over and over the years. And you, like you said, are sharing around the younger generations and how they're being affected. This kind of puts a bow together on this assessment that we did leading into an event last week around remote work, leading remote work. So we were getting a lot of input that like just leaders were really needing help with this. And the consistent thing across the board, I think literally was like 90% reported that they just feel disconnected. And what you're saying is like, man, when we don't even have the energy to be doing, what we're doing in our work, we don't have the energy to collaborate and connect. Gosh, it's just so I know that you have a number of insights for us. And let's just start with like where you're leading organizations and leaders to address the challenges. Like, what are you helping them to prioritize right now?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is we're trying to help people prioritize what does it mean and what do you need to feel connected. And I think that is different for every team. But if you're in a virtual environment, it takes intentionality. You can't rely on the run ins. And not that the run ins equal connection anyway, but you have to be really thoughtful about like, how are you scheduling time with your teams one on one and collectively? How do you structure those meetings? How are you building in time that human connection is just as important, if not more, than the tasks of the to dos? Because when people feel seen, like I just got done with a team meeting and someone's like, oh, I have a lot going on personally this week and was more excited about things happening with her son than the work. I'm like, that's awesome. That's part of this. And I think we forget about that. And so often we jump to tasks, we jump to dos because our schedules are packed. And we forget that there's actually value in the relationship building before we get to the work and tasks. And people want to feel seen. They want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like you care about them. And it sounds easier said than done, but so many people are missing that piece. And so some of the work we're doing with leaders is helping them recognize like where does your value come in? Your value comes in of connecting with people first versus getting stuff done. Your value comes in, you don't have to be the go to person, you don't have to have the answers. And so we're doing a lot of mindset shifting and priority shifting with leaders and teams to help them individually and collectively understand what do they need and are you regularly having those conversations because what you needed 6 months ago might be different than what you need today. And if we're not building that cadence in to check in and adjust, we're gonna end up struggling more than we need to.
One thing that I just want to hone in on for a second is, the power of our mind and shifting the way that we think leads us down path to change. If you were to summarize, you were talking about mindset shifts. If you were to share the mindset shift that you most encourage leaders to make, how would you summarize that?
I think the biggest one is recognizing that as a leader, people want to see realness and authenticity from their leaders more than polish and perfection any day of the week. And I think in this chaotic environment, so many people with formal leadership roles, because we don't believe leadership is a title or role, but if I have that responsibility, if I have that title or role, I do have an additional level of responsibility because of the influence I have over culture. So I want to be really clear about that distinction.
Mm.
And what I see is so many people who have that formal role feel like somehow they have to be superhuman, that they have to be able to rise above the stress and the burnout and the exhaustion, and that they have to put their game face on, and that they have to have it all together for their teams, and they have to always be positive, or as we say, above the line, and that they're not allowed to be human. And I think the mindset shift of no, you can be human and you can say, hey, you guys, I'm on the struggle bus today, or hey, yeah, this is hard. And what do you do when you're having those days? What do you do when you're having those moments where you're struggling, where your humanity is getting the best of you and helping them realize that they're not superhuman and that actually leaning into their humanity, leaning into their authenticity, leaning into that vulnerability is actually a sign of strength. And that is a really big shift for a lot of people and a lot of people in formal leadership roles for sure.
I could feel the level of just heaviness on my shoulders release as you were
Oh,
sharing
yay.
that. Yeah, I'm serious when I say that, and I can also say in that I'm diving into this courageous leadership topic myself, and just how I can embrace some of these things and just learn from you to be able to share with other listeners. Recently, I've been going through a number of just health challenges, and we've been trying to get to the core of what that is. And I will tell you, on the days that I wake up so stressed about it and just feeling like overwhelmed and I need to have the energy up and I need to be. And then when I just talk to our team and share, like, here's where I'm at today and just level set on what I'm going through, I feel like what you just shared. Just be authentic, share where I'm at. And the response is, how can we help? Like, hey, what can I take off your plate today? And we are all just on that same playing field, helping to dig in and get what we need done, but supporting each other. Just feels good to have that way of being.
One, I love that for you and I love that for your team, and I'm not surprised. But the other thing that I think is so important about what you shared, Nikki, is our self-limiting brain will tell us that, ooh, like they're going to think less of me or they're going to judge me or whatever. And it's really just the opposite for the most part. I mean, I always have to have a little qualifier, but for the most part, when we lead with authenticity and we lead with that vulnerability, the response is usually empathy and connection.
Mhm.
And I think we fail to realize that. And then it's like, "Oh god, that feels so good." Like you said, the weight is lifted off of my shoulder. I don't have to have it all together. And most people want to contribute. Most people wanna be helpful. And so why would we think it's any different and that people wouldn't wanna do that for us? But we're funny creatures and we get in our own way. And so it's reminding ourselves of, "That's just a story. I've got an awesome team," or, "You know what? Like, here we go. And if I model this, then you also give permission for other people to be able to speak up and share when they're having a rough time. And when the response is that we see we have each other's backs, that's what creates an awesome team. Like high performing, psychologically safe teams are not all unicorns and rainbows. They're speaking up, they're saying when they're struggling, they're helping each other out, they're having difficult feedback. And that's what we need to be able to bring ourselves, our teams, our organizations, et cetera, to the next level.
I know Stephanie on our team just went through the Courageous Leadership program with you, and I remember her saying, "I just had a lot of, like, light bulb moments, just things that were, just illuminating," and she had so many notes, and she shared some with our team. Curious if maybe you could summarize for a moment the teachings that typically get the big light bulb moments to go off for people around courageous leadership.
There's a lot. I think one is just reframing the fact that vulnerability, while most people have some wiring and some narrative that tells them vulnerability is a bad thing or it's a weak thing or whatever it is, that it's actually a sign of courage. So that's the first thing. But that also, we do a lot of work of helping people realize the signs and signals that they're triggered. They're triggered to self protect. They're triggered to armor up, et cetera. And so we borrow from the conscious leadership group. They talk about being above the line or below the line because it's just a really simple way of looking at that. And so we walk people through, how do you know when you're above the line? How do you know when you're below the line? So, like, a lot of people will say things like, well, when I'm above the line, I'm more patient, I'm more empathetic, I'm curious, I'm open, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. But when I'm below the line, that turns to maybe apathy or low energy or negativity or judgmental or irritability, et cetera. And then we invite people to identify, well, what are some of those triggers that tend to bring you below the line? And then what are things that act like a trampoline so that like in the moment boost and reset? So it might be things like taking a short walk, or I know you and I are both music people. I have a playlist that Rosie's survival list. I'm like, okay, I need a boost right now. Like this will shift my mindset. Or maybe it's getting out in nature or looking at a picture of a loved one, or, what are the things that literally in that moment can be that reset? Maybe you have a mantra you say to yourself. And then we walk people through, okay, so now how does your filter about other people change whether you're above or below the line? And I'll use an example of, well, like when I'm above the line, I might view my team as smart, hardworking, thoughtful, caring, competent, innovative, collaborative. But then suddenly when I'm below the line, it turns to annoying, needy, incompetent, doesn't care, out for themselves. I don't work with two sets of people, right? The difference is me. And so we help people start to realize that the quality of our interactions differs profoundly based on where our thinking is. And then from that, we really just kind of go into this summary, if you will, that going below the line is not a bad thing. Going below the line is a human thing. The difference of people who are able to show up as courageous leaders in their lives and maximize their positive impact is they are keenly aware when they're below the line, and when they're there, they tend to it. They use a trampoline. They find a way to go below the line in a protected bubble, meaning they don't have any important discussions when they're below the line. They don't make major decisions when they're below the line. You pause more. And I always say the days I'm below the line, I feel like I'm in slow motion because I pause and reread emails and text messages like 5 times before I send them. I might say to my team member, like, if I might say, "Hey, Nikki, can I bounce my thinking off you because I know I'm really below the line? Am I overreacting here?" We call in reinforcements. And so we use that as a check-in, like start out your huddles and meetings. Are you above the line? Thumbs up, riding the line, hand flat below the line and do a check-in. Hey, I might need to support you. You don't even have to get into why you're below the line. And so that one is like that ends up opening this huge aha for people to go, one, it's human to go below the line. I don't have to have it all together. I have language now that I can use where I don't have to get into the details. It's okay to ask for support. I can go back and clean stuff up. And that one we've been using for, gosh, 15, 20 years. And it's so impactful because it's simple, but it's practical. So that's one of the ones that we use in every single workshop we do, regardless. That's like one of the core exercises that we lean back on over and over.
That's so good. And I think about, not only the lift from our shoulders, lifting the load of being able to just share where we're at and feel better about that, but then the clarity for others on our team not to be guessing like if something feels off, like to because we can make up stories in our mind of what's going on or is this person mad at me or whatever, right? And so just so much comes from that, just open, authentic sharing.
You said something really important, Nikki, that I think we need to build upon is in the absence of data, our brains fill it in with story. So if you and I are on a team together and I don't tell you that I'm below the line or I'm having a bad day, you're going to experience me more intense, hyper task focused, pushing, driven, and maybe a little bit short. And you're going to be like, WTF is with Rosie. And guess what? Now you might go, "Oh my god, did I do something bad? Am I in trouble?" Now you're gonna go talk to your team member, right? And this swirl happens versus if I say, "Hey, Nikki, I just want you to know I'm really trying, but I'm below the line today." What it doesn't do is give me a free pass to be a jerk to you, but it says to you, "Hey, Rosie's on the struggle bus." And now I don't have to add all this extra meeting. And I might actually lean in with empathy and go, "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do to support you?" And I think that's where things go astray is it's not just, "Hey, it's okay to have your humanity," but if you don't communicate that to other people, that's where we get into trouble because your actions are gonna show up differently, and they are gonna fill it in with story, and now you've got unnecessary swirl, unnecessary rumination, unnecessary struggle that if you just communicated it, man, things could be a lot smoother.
So, Rosie, this has been so helpful. And like I said, I'm in a season right now where I'm struggling with some health stuff. I'm not showing up on my A game every day. So, below the line a lot more days than the alternative. And it allows me to just feel less weighted and just going into, the week this week, I appreciate that. And I think I might adopt this below and above the line with our team just to roll that out and help all of us, like leading with myself. I think that's one of the most powerful things that you said is when we as leaders show up this way, watch the ripple effect that happens on the others to then follow suit in all of us rather than a negative spiral or swirl like you shared. It's so much more positive to impact. So just really appreciate working through that with you today. And I know you have, like I shared, Stephanie on our team went through a program recently. You've got many different support mechanisms to help leaders to show up as the courageous leader that they want to be. Help us to understand those.
We have obviously public programs and the work we do with clients, nothing is cookie cutter, but we have a lot of core exercises and things that we do. So whether we're doing individual coaching, whether we're doing succession planning and development, whether we're doing team cohesion work or one of our public programs, whether it's courageous leadership or dare to lead, really I look at everything that we do, our whole purpose is about rehumanizing the workplace. And where I've been leaning into lately is we rehumanize the workplace by equipping formal and informal leaders and teams to show up courageously and be future ready, which means equipping them to be able to take off the masks and armor, equipping them to be able to show up authentic, and then to have the conversations they need to have the difficult feedback, to receive the difficult feedback, to listen to one another, to look at what does it mean to challenge self-limiting narrative, all of the things that really are a part of us being able to show up authentically human. And I really look at it as we're helping people close the gap between what our disruptive world is demanding of us and our own human biology because the world demands that we can somehow lean into that uncertainty and volatility, but our own human DNA is like, No, thank you. I'm going to cling tightly to what is familiar. And I think that's where a lot of our struggle comes in. So we're all about kind of closing that gap and helping people and teams be future ready. And so I appreciate everything you shared because really as simple as it is, you start small. Like give some language, core and common language and core and common tools that you can use with your team is how you start to like make it okay to step into that arena to lean into vulnerability. And something like the above and below the line is a really just powerful starting point. That's why we give it away. We put it in our book. We use it in everything we do. It's not rocket science, but it's impactful.
Yeah. Simple and profound is how I would summarize that. I'm excited to roll some of that out and maybe we can report back on our next episode.
Yes,
So,
please do. Yes.
yes. Rosie, thank you for sharing and helping me lighten my load today. I just feel better through this conversation and for the inspiration around mindset shifts that we can take and actions that we can try. Really appreciate that and can't wait to share with our team. Before we go, we're going to leave you, listeners, with a few takeaways from Rosie's Courageous Leadership Program. And you can also visit Rosie's website for more information on her next Courageous Leadership Program. We'll link that in the details of the episode show notes.
It's one thing to hypothesize or guess, and that in and of itself has value, right? Like, oh my gosh, I never really thought about this. But better yet, especially if this is a key working relationship, go have that conversation. Find out like what challenges are you facing right now? I value this partnership. And I realize like I don't know like what other things you have going. Oh my God, I had no idea you had this priority project thrown on your plate. I didn't realize you were down 3 people. I didn't realize you had 2 people out on leave. Or I didn't know that this is what you were needing, or that you're really trying to put better boundaries in because you've been overworked and you're trying to be diligent. Like that's helpful to know. And if we're not having those conversations with key working relationships, it's hard to honor boundaries. It's hard to know what to do. So I would say even being curious about or kind of guessing and keeping that into perspective, first and foremost, super helpful. But even better yet, start having those conversations. So we're not assuming and we know, gosh, I didn't realize there's something that I could do that could be helpful or something I'm doing isn't helpful, and not in a shaming, blaming way. But wouldn't it be great if we're having those collaborative discussions and then you can say, here's what would be really helpful for us as a department, as an individual, et cetera. How can we leverage this outward mindset and start to really improve our communication? And communication always, always, always starts with listening. And most of us can probably stand to improve how we listen, even if we think we're a good listener. And because listening well is so lacking in our world today, when we can learn to listen really well, it's a superpower for us.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.